New Orleans is known for its distinctive music, cuisine, dialects, and its annual celebrations, most notably Mardi Gras. We had never been to New Orleans. It just seems like such a unique city. If you do any traveling, you should try to spend a few days there. We were there for 3 days walking around on our own and going on 2 walking tours, one in the Garden District and one in the French Quarter. And we also spent a day at the National World War II Museum, which was the subject of a previous video. It was in the mid-60s Fahrenheit when we arrived in the afternoon, but then a cold front moved in and it was in the mid-20s during the following days. We went through a lot of propane keeping our RV warm, and he had to bundle up when we were on the streets of New Orleans, also known as NOLA, or the Big Easy. We did try some New Orleans cuisine, dry-aged swordfish, and a Gulf shrimp pasta dish for dinner.
This is my favorite tour to give simply because it has everything I love to talk about. On the tour, we're going to cover a lot of architecture, a lot of history. I'll also point out some celebrity homes as we're walking around, and I always toss in a few botany moments. First roller skating rinks that was ever established in the United States, and when it was a rink, they had enough room for a full-blown orchestra and a spectator platform. This building has been a lot of things over the years, but what it is currently is a collection of locally owned shops and businesses. This house was designed by the architect Gallier, and it was built for an Englishman named Briggs. Now, Briggs immigrated directly from England to New Orleans sometime in the 1840s, and he had seen the end of slavery happen in England. He didn't change his viewpoints upon arriving in New Orleans, where slavery was in full swing. In fact, he spoke out against slavery on numerous occasions and declared himself to be an abolitionist. However, the man had no problem whatsoever with the concept and the practice of indentured servitude, specifically the indentured servitude of the Irish. 2 famous people have lived in this house, both Anne Rice. This is where she wrote her novel, The Violin, and also actor Nicolas Cage owned this home. When Nick bought this house, he only owned it from 2006 2007. There's a rumor that he never even spent the night in this house, but he did something to this house that affects it to this day. He had a team of interior designers come in, and they basically juiced this house. They stripped out all of its good old character, then modernized it to the point where the value of the home dramatically decreased. What has been going on with this house for really like the last 4 years is a full-scale restoration. It's built in my favorite architectural style, a style called French Second Empire. If y'all are familiar with the Munsters of the Addams family, you might recognize this style of architecture because both of their family homes are French Second Empire. It's kind of what I love about it. It always looks like if you didn't do the proper carrying up, this house would start to look like a haunted house. They showed home movies of the boys tossing the football in the front yard. That is the front yard. They were tossing around that football. After the pandemic, Archie and Olivia decided it was time to downsize. They sold the family home. They didn't move far. They just bought a very beautiful townhouse over on St. Charles Avenue. So John Goodman and his wife have lived in this house for almost 20 years. And before John Goodman and his wife lived there, somebody else famous lived there. Frontman from 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, owned this house. When Trent owned it, he put in a sound studio, threw a few wild parties. He didn't feel like it was a good fit. He put it on the market. John Goodman and his wife happened to be the ones who bought it. John Goodman is originally from St. Louis, Missouri, and from what I understand, he still owns ranch land right outside of St. Louis. But he was down here filming a movie called The Big Easy with Dennis Quaid and Ellen Barkin, and his wife, who's from Bogalusa, was in New Orleans on some sort of little bachelorette trip, and they met, they fell in love. And when they got married, decided that New Orleans was going to be their permanent home. We are very fortunate that that happened. Without a doubt, John Goodman is New Orleans' favorite adopted son. And this is the most controversial house on my tour. People either really like it or they really don't. I was listening to a podcast interview with Mrs. Bullock, and I found out things about her I did not know, such as her mother was a professional opera singer who did long-running shows in Germany and Austria. And Sandra Bullock was talking about like some of my best memories of my life, my childhood memories, what does it mean the most, are of the time I spent while my mom was on tour in these places like Germany and Austria. And I'm just sitting here listening to this, and I was like, no wonder she loves this house. Heartstrings, mom, da-da-da-da-da, all of it. This, in fact, was the first place in the city where people of the Jewish faith could legally be buried. That was before we got 2 Jewish mausoleums, Toro 1 and Toro 2 uptown. This cemetery, why it sits kind of right smack dab in the middle of the Garden District, it's not because they didn't believe in pushing cemeteries to the outskirts. It was in fact because when they were clearing out the plantation land, they came across 2 abandoned tombs and they were like, well, this is where the cemetery is going to go. This is the filming cemetery of New Orleans. If you have seen any movie, television show, music video filmed with a cemetery scene in New Orleans since 1969, I promise it was filmed at Lafayette 1. The city of New Orleans gets a big fat check anytime they film movies like Interview with the Vampire, Double Jeopardy, television shows, American Horror Story, Coven, The Originals, NCIS New Orleans. My favorite thing ever filmed here, the New Kids on the Block Right Stuff video.
That's how much water passes any given area along this part of the river in an hour. So that translates to over 300 million gallons of water an hour that pass through here when the river's at its normal level and stage. Although we were founded by the French, by 1763, they had ceded the whole territory. Whoever created this, it was a man, and he did this whole thing by hand. So all of that little scene in the middle, that beadwork, those are all tiny, tiny beads that he sewed by hand. They sketch out a scene that they want to depict, and then they'll actually execute it with the beads, the feathers, and then you can see these pictures on the side, and then they come out on Mardi Gras Day, and they come out a few other times of the year. This property was constructed as a horse stable. On there, at the rear of the pond, there's a beautiful cast iron frog. It kind of illustrates that cast iron technique.
I'll put links to the other videos in this series in the description of this video. I hope you enjoy it. Please give it a like if you do and consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, thanks for watching.